everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you for coming tonight. I know it's a little wet out, but we're very excited to be here. Thank you to Merrill Lynch, to Marina especially, to Brooke for making our connection, to a lot of people who have made this event happen tonight. So welcome. And we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to get started very quickly. And first I want to just say thank you to GABA, to Merrill Lynch, to Orchard Hotel for our survey prize coming at the end of our event, so stick around. And just a word about Women in Business, if you're not familiar. We are here to support you. We're a forum for discussion, for topics, for networking, for events like this. So if you have ideas or places or some connections you'd like to suggest, please do. And this is also a very open forum. So, you know, we have a discussion, we're going to bring up some points, but, you know, break in. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have mics. We're going to make it a very open forum, and we've got at least an hour and a half till 9. So rest safe, and if you want to go back and get some food, let us know. We'll escort you, and we'll have also food and wine after the event is over. So we have some excellent panelists tonight, and we're very excited, and GABA has allowed us to make this event happen tonight, so thank you to GABA. And if you have any questions about membership, also please let myself know or Stephanie. And I think maybe we should get started now. Yeah.
Welcome everybody. My name is Franziska Radiker. I'm here not for professional reasons, but more for personal ones, because I'm also interested in women, wealth management, how do we plan for retirement. I got asked to be the moderator for this because I moderated and organized a panel that looked at similar topics, albeit with a slightly more international focus last year. And I'm very excited to have my other panelists out here with me. They are the professionals here, so let me introduce them briefly for now, and then as they get into answering the questions, they can bring out the relevant parts of their background. So first our host also, Marina Ferry from Merrill Lynch. She's a senior financial advisor here in San Mateo, focusing, if I'm correct, on retirement planning and investment management for Bay Area families and professionals. You're working a lot with high-tech, biotech clients, options compensation, cash, ESP holdings, so forth. She grew up in Argentina and is now out here to answer your questions as well as go into more depth on a couple of questions.
Thank you, Franziska. That was very nice.
We have Deborah Price. She's the founder and CEO of the Money Coaching Institute and a certified money coach. So she helps provide a perspective on how women can better understand their fears and anxieties, the whole range of emotion that we might have around money, be it fear, denial, or unfounded optimism or pessimism, or whatever might go on here. And she's really trying to help us also find some strategies and tips to really make good financial decisions and fit with our life. And then we have Pamela Rhodes. She's coming originally from a lawyer background, she's a JD, but now also a CFP, a estate and legacy specialist. She's working at Rhodes and Fletcher. I assume you're one of the two co-founders. And you're doing wealth coaching, so I'll let you talk a little bit about that as you come in. She's also teaching on the subject of finance, and she volunteers and is an artist in her spare time. Before we jump into some of the more deeper questions here, let me just ask you, because we want to make this really interactive. So we won't have a big portion of Q&A at the end. We really want you to raise your hand and come up with questions, comments, share your stories if you can along the way. I looked at women and wealth management and all these topics. Initially, I came up with a mind map that had all these different things that popped up in my mind on that, but I wanted to ask you around finances and women in business, since we're GABA Women's Association. How many of you are currently active in business? Can you raise your hands? Okay. And how many of you are self-employed, working for a mid-sized organization and a large organization? Okay, so just so that our panelists get a little bit of a sense. I found out that women are making most of the financial decisions in their households. Looking at some statistics, I think 95% of the women are involved in household decisions and 80% are actually the primary decision makers. More than half of them are responsible for the bills. They control substantial assets. They're actually almost half of the top wealth holders in the US, and even more than a third of the high net worth people, which is defined as more than $1 million in investable assets. But still there are problems out there. Women still earn less. They earn about 8% of the men's income if they're working full-time. And about half of the women business owners in the US finance their business partly with their personal savings. They have rising debt and just from life's problems that can come up. They live 5 to 8 years longer. They need to finance a longer retirement, but if they take care of most of the family problems that come up with children, parents themselves, a spouse, they have less time in the workforce. And I was shocked to hear, you think, let me just ask you, how many women over 65 do you think rely on Social Security?
80%.
Yeah, too many. It's over 2/3. And 2/3 of people
In the US?
Yeah. Yeah. And 2/3 of women have actually been hit by a major financial crisis during their, I think, 40 to 65 year ages, like job loss, divorce, death, or illness, which really impacts both the emotional aspect as well as the financials. A lot of them plan to retire later, 70 or not at all. And they aim for saving less than men. Men, I think, say in surveys that they aim for about 400,000 in retirement savings, and women on average 200. And so I think all these things come into play as we think about what we're doing here. So as we keep those topics in mind, there are uncertain times, as you know. My secret weapon. As we keep all of this in mind, let's think about what does it mean for each of us as we hear news about foreclosures, as we see our own maybe retirement savings go more down than up with the markets and other things. So let's make use of all the wonderful experts we have out here. Any immediate questions from the audience? Reactions, thoughts? Let me maybe start here, Pamela. With the recent recession and its economic threats, everybody's getting probably more anxious than they might have been before about their finances. What are we really trying to achieve by managing our wealth, and how do you think about what women have to keep in mind about that?
Well, I think if there's any good news about the recession, it's made people more conscious and more afraid, and so people are paying more attention, and I think it's a wake-up call. I'm very concerned about the lack of preparedness of particularly the United States population. We live in a consumer consumption-driven economy. You can see how we measure our gross domestic product by how well Macy's and Nordstrom's are doing. We're not a manufacturing country anymore. And so when I looked at the question of managing your wealth, the question that comes up for me is, why is it you're managing your wealth? What do you want your wealth to accomplish? And I look at security, as a primary goal for myself and clients. So is it your secure lifestyle or the lifestyle of your family? I was talking to one of your members today about they're not having a will in place, and so that's a concern. Taking care of your family is really important. And I think part of the challenge is there's lots of information out there. There's so much now that it's overwhelming. The other challenge is that it's complicated. If you think back to your parents and your grandparents, they didn't have options. They didn't have ETFs. They didn't have 401k plans. They probably had a pension plan. As a financial planner, we don't see them much anymore. They're way too expensive, as we found out. So there's so much information out there. How do you wade through the information? So for today's purposes, and anytime you go to a workshop or a seminar, you'll get all this information. I really encourage you to think about some action items that you can do as a result of being here tonight. So what are we trying to achieve? If we look at having 20 to 40 years of retirement lifestyle, what is that going to look like for you? It's an incredible amount of time, and if you look at a very low inflation rate of 2 to 3%, the dollar of purchasing power you have today in 20 years is going to be worth 40 cents. You know, just look, you only just have to look at gasoline and postage, to the cost of gasoline and postage, to see that. So are you prepared to provide 20 to 40 years of retirement income for yourself and your family?
It also sounds like a very huge time span to account for just the vagaries of, is it 20, is it 40, or how do you?
And one of the challenges there is that since we're living so much longer, what happens is we become frail. So people in their 70s, 80s, 90s have medical problems that my grandparents didn't have. My grandparents both died before they were 70, and that was pretty typical. But now we have nursing home, assisted care, dementia. And if we look at inflation requiring you to be conscious about your money and making your money work hard for you, the cost of health care is the number one horse in that inflation race. It's really, really, really scary. So one of the things that we look at in terms of securing your lifestyle is to really look at what you have now. What do you have in place now, and to understand what you have in place. When's the last time you looked at your statement? If you have a portfolio or investments in stocks and bonds, when's the last time you actually looked at your statement and asked your advisor, why do I have this? What does this do for me? How is this taxed? What is this going to look like in 10 or 20 years? So, you know, people like myself and Marina we're advisors, and that's what we do, and you really should be making use of that relationship and asking questions, understanding what you have now, and having a good knowledge base of what it is, what it's supposed to do for you. I like to put labels on accounts, go, this is for the kids' college, and this is for, you know, the vacation fund, and this is for our retirement, and this is for developing the business. So you really understand what that wealth is for, and then have the knowledge. So where do you get the knowledge? You really have to, you know, be focused. Looking at what's in place for you if you work for a company, understanding your benefits, that really is a task. That means you take the benefits booklet out of that back drawer of the file cabinet and you dust it off and you find out it's from 1997, so it's probably not current. But getting a current copy of your benefits booklet, finding out what you would earn if you were out sick or your spouse was out on a disability, what are your life insurance coverages, what are your health insurance coverage, what's your lifetime maximum if you had a big health problem, understanding what you have, having the knowledge about what you have in place now. And then, so looking at what you have now, and then looking at what the need is. How much are you going to need? And here's where you have to kind of be your own CEO of your own company. How do you know what you're going to need? Well, how much is Social Security going to provide for you if you're entitled to Social Security? How much are you going to get? Send in that benefits booklet, benefits request, or go online and find out how much you're going to get. How is it going to be taxed? Understand, Social Security gets taxed now. Wasn't taxed previously. Do you have a pension plan? Do you have stock options? What are they going to look like? Do you have your own business? Are you going to sell it when you retire? Is there a market for it? What's the fair market value? Does it have a value? A lot of people think they have a business, but they really, you know, have a job, and if they weren't there, it wouldn't really be a business. So, do you have a buyer for the business? Do you have a buy-sell agreement in place if you have a partner? If something happened to you, what would your family get from your business? Understanding the things that are in place, and then doing the math. How much is it going to take to support your lifestyle for 20 to 40 years? Well, Marina's got you have all the software that does that. I know that we can crunch numbers for you ad infinitum, but you can say, well, what's my current cost of living? Just like a CEO would do. What does it cost to run the company? So do that budget. You don't have to call it a budget, it's not a diet, but it's just a spending plan. What does it cost to keep your company going? And let's say you need $150,000 of pre-tax income to run your family. Well, that's $100,000 in after-tax income to keep your family going. So where's it gonna come from? Well, maybe you're gonna get $20,000 from Social Security, and maybe you'll get $30,000 from a government pension that you had. So where's the $50,000 gonna come from? Well, you have to have 25 times what you want to earn in income somewhere, invest it somewhere, because we use a 4% assumption. If you have 100,000, that'll generate about $4,000 a year safely in today's market. So you can do the math and think about how much money you would need to generate $50,000 of income, and that's where you have to go with what you have in place and how you're going to get there. So I use a 25 times for every dollar of retirement income you want. After you've deducted Social Security and all the other things you're going to get, for the gap, you have to have 25 times that in an asset base. So what are some of the things in your way? Anybody? What's in your way?
So a couple things. One is like, as we, I did some of the things that you talked about, and then when you go out and invest, you realize, you have to measure your risk tolerance, right? And then at the same time, if you realize you're kind of like below the average for your age range, I'm wondering, I'd like to get your comment in terms of, have you guys helped some clients to kind of just adjust to the right level of risk? Risk is still, everybody's different, but you would also notice that some people are just way below what they're supposed to be. Have you guys shepherded them through that process? The other thing, in the email, you guys talk about taking out the emotions. I would love to hear more about that.
Well, I think that risk tolerance is measured in at least two ways. There's the looking at your portfolio and your age and what you're trying to accomplish, and what you tell me and what you write on the questionnaire is a measure, is a tool. But there's the other, which is the emotional, the stomach ache. Kind of, a lot of people tell us that, oh, we're really aggressive investors. We're willing to take lots of risks. But then they see the headlines or their portfolio dips, and they're not really. So it's about looking at the emotional aspect. I don't think there's any should that you're supposed to have a certain risk tolerance at a certain age. I think having confidence in what you're doing, understanding what you're invested in and what each of those things are supposed to do will help you get to a risk tolerance that's appropriate. We look at trying to keep our clients 2% ahead of inflation and taxes over the long term. So inflation could be 3%, which it is now, but it could be 13%. I have gray hair. I was around in 1981 when inflation was 13%. So keeping ahead of inflation and keeping ahead of taxes, because taxes are a huge threat. And I was just, for tonight and for other things, looking at what we're looking at in terms of the deficit and the downturn in the economy and how many people think we have to have increases in tax rates. It's not going to happen before the election. Nobody's going to say, yeah, but they have to raise the money somewhere. So if they print more money, there'll be inflation.
Right. I have one comment in terms of the risk tolerance, because I know it's very important. Each person has their own risk tolerance. I agree with you. Like, some people can afford to take a lot of risk with the hope of getting better returns. But as an advisor, I also see it as a matrix between our tactical outlook for stocks and bonds in the next 18 months. So if you see that things are not looking that great in the next 18 months, even for an aggressive investor, your research investment committee will cut down on the exposure that you have to stocks or more volatile investments, because you know that even the most aggressive investor could suffer like big time in the near term. So you have to be mindful of your time horizon and balance that out with your risk tolerance and the tactical and strategic outlook that your committee has. So that's my 2 cents in terms of how to gauge your risk tolerance. It's kind of like you have to tend it like a garden, and you have to monitor yourself and the markets. And that's why I think that you cannot have take all of that, the world on your shoulders and say, okay, I have to be in charge of my job, my kids, my family, and the world economy, and make the right steps as to how I'm gonna get to point from A to Z. So that's why I usually delegate that responsibility to an advisory team. From a legal standpoint, a tax advisory standpoint, a stock standpoint, a planning, like you have to leverage your resources, because I mean the world is moving at such a fast pace that you cannot embrace every aspect of your financial life in addition to everything else. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, I used to be in both of their shoes, and I left the financial services industry because and I might be a little controversial here in the space, and I'm comfortable with that. But the fact of the matter is that we don't understand enough as human beings our own emotional reactivity. And there are reasons why you have the emotional reactions that you do around money that are important for you to know. Because if you can understand your emotional reactive behaviors, you can begin to control them. To the extent that you're blind to them, and you know, you can sort of see it as if, you know, we're driving down the road and we have a vision of retirement and all the things that we want to create in our lives. The problem is there are potholes in the road and it's dark. And until you actually begin to shine light on the underlying emotional behaviors and the cause and the root of them, you will keep falling into the pothole. And all the best investment advice in the world will not keep you from doing that. And that's why we have stock market crashes. We could control the world economy if we could learn to help people control their behaviors. But we're blind to them. And money in and of itself is always the elephant in the room. We don't talk about money. It's taboo. It scares people to death. And every single person in this room has a history with money that is both emotional and behavioral. And when you learn to identify the potholes in the road, you can either learn to repave the road, because we're talking about brain science here. We're in a neuro revolution, and what we understand about money in the brain through the fields of neuroscience, neuroeconomics, behavioral finance is quite profound. The problem is it has not reached the masses yet. But I do want you to know that a lot of the behaviors that you have around money were formed before you were the age of 12. Some of them before you were even verbal. And so it's not rocket science to begin to explore that. But I will say, you know, I was in the industry for 23 years, and my clients would make the same mistakes. They would buy high and sell low forever. There was nothing I could do, because what happens is you hit an emotional pocket, and next thing you know, you're there and you can't sustain it emotionally. And have you ever had that feeling? How many people sold in 2008? We both. It's okay, don't be embarrassed. You know, so, but you have to have good financial people around you to help you navigate the road. I call them co-pilots. And I absolutely believe in financial planning and financial advice, but I do know that we're reaching a real critical point in the world where our behaviors are not serving us. And we have to begin to do that exploration. So.
And I will be a little controversial
Good,
too.
I like it.
Because that's how Argentinians are feisty. Okay, so basically I do agree that behavior has to change, but I think that if you feel like you're out of control in terms of your finances, then you're gonna have more erratic behavior than if you have a partner in crime that is in the business and can give you a different perspective or try to give you some reasoning and historical perspective, right, on the markets and diversification and how to minimize risk. So maybe you won't make such like crazy decisions on that, or maybe you'll make crazier decisions. You never know, right? It could go both ways.
That's the co-pilot I was referring
Yes.
to.
No, I mean,
Absolutely.
I have to say, in my case, it's more sane decisions, but that's okay.
Well, I like that analogy of the co-pilot, and I think it's really important that you know who your co-pilot is.
Right.
And, you know, what they're, I mean, when I look at the Madoff scandal and look at really intelligent, successful people putting their blind faith in someone, it's astounding, but it was so common, and people didn't know what they were invested in, and they were reliant on one person giving them false information, because they were kind of in this private club, and it was really special, and Bernie was your guy, and I have friends of friends told me at a party that they lost a significant amount of money, and this fellow just basically embezzled the money out of their account. And I said, what were you invested in? And she said, I don't know. And it was just, my heart stopped, because like, how could you not know what you're invested in? You know, it's kind of like not knowing where your kids are after school. You have to pay attention. So having an advisor, but also being part of the team, not just that, oh yeah, they're going to take care of it.
Right.
So in terms of emotional action items, Pamela was speaking of more statistical and inventory action items from a, you know, TEPZAC perspective.
Add it all up.
In terms of
figure it
emotional
out, how
action
much.
items, what would you recommend? Of course, obviously, you have to have a good co-pilot to keep you in check, but you have to be able to take the step and say, I need to be more risk tolerant or less risk tolerant. And how do you start?
Yeah, I'm actually an advocate for moving away from the term about risk tolerance.
Okay.
Because I have not actually seen it be as effective as it could be. And I think we could get a little more specific relative to one's history with money. And so if you know, for example, that you have a lot of fear and anxiety, overwhelm, confusion, anybody fall into that category? It's okay, let's be real, because that's a really common thing, and that's why I use those 4 things in particular. You may not answer the questions on the quiz, on the analysis correctly in order to assess that on an emotional level, you have a low risk tolerance. At a financial level, your risk tolerance could be higher. So it's really about degrees and knowing oneself. And in the event, so you look at, you know, in the event that you hear that there's a big market crash on the way, and that the inflation is going higher, and, you know, more unemployment and certain kinds of things that you might be hearing on the news, if that tends to make you really skittish and you feel uncomfortable and very stressed and anxious, then at an emotional level, your risk tolerance is probably really low. Because when it gets dicey up here, which may not actually mean that there's anything really wrong that you should sell, you're probably not going to be able to sustain it, because you don't have the emotional, and that emotional container, by the way, may be due to unconscious factors. Your mother, for example, could have been a depression child, and as a result, you heard forever, there's not enough money. You have to be worried, you know, frugal. There's like behavioral patterns that get hardwired in the brain very early on. Once you begin to understand that, you can say, oh, wait a minute, this is actually an emotion that I'm having that's based upon something that isn't even true for me. It was true for my mother and my father and whoever else, but you inherit these patterns, right? So as you begin to unravel that, and it's a journey worth taking, you begin to unravel that, and that's what we do, then you can begin to say, oh, now I understand. So you understand the content and the history, so those potholes become revealed, and then you have a context for change. How can we possibly change something if we don't have an awareness? Have you ever tried to change something you didn't have an awareness of? I don't know about you, but I have found that really challenging, really tough. So as you develop an awareness, you then have power. And power is what we're talking about. You could all be powerful investors. There's probably something in your way. Wouldn't it be nice to know what that was, right? because then you can manage it.
I kind of feel like I acknowledge that there are certain emotional factors involved in my financial decision making, but particularly in the last few years, I think that almost becomes irrelevant because what I've seen is the financial industry being totally irresponsible with derivatives and all kinds of investments that even sophisticated investors don't understand and lost their shirt on. And so what good does it do me to understand, how my childhood affected how I feel about money? Because I feel it's so totally beyond my control. And I didn't used to feel like that before this financial crisis.
So what you're talking about is something that we call financial PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. I'm serious, it's a real phenomenon.
Is it really post?
Yeah. Maybe existing PTSD, active PTSD for many people. But the fact is that you're going to have to live in the world that we live in. So you're going to have to do something with your money eventually. And maybe it's, really getting excellent referrals and being more conservative for a while until you learn to trust. But I think what you're saying is actually extremely relevant because we have to understand that our entire monetary system is based upon belief and trust. Mm-hmm. And when people don't trust it anymore is when things can get precarious. I've studied money my entire life and the history of money, and we're at a precarious time. But we have to understand that if we don't create a system that we can trust and demand it, then the system will get more scary. So you are powerful people. You need to be in touch with your congressman and your Senate, and you need to demand tighter regulations because that is the only answer, in my opinion, to creating greater trust. And there need to be bigger fines and culpability on behalf of the people who commit financial crimes, because those people have wiped out enough people from my perspective.
Right. I think you also have to look at a practical application, right? You have to be your own advocate and try to do the best for yourself. I mean, if you look at March of 2009, the S&P was at 666 and people were calling for a 400. So anyone can yield to negative thoughts or Armageddon, right? But on the other hand, you have to look, I know that it's not, we don't have like the longest time horizon on earth, right? But if we look at some references throughout the history, we have experienced a lot of traumatic events, right, in the stock market. And in the long term, as long as you have your right risk profile for the right goal, for the right time horizon, and you have a sound financial plan in place, and you watch it on a monthly basis, and you rebalance, and you do all of the basic principles. If you go back to the basic principles of investing, you have a better chance of having control over the situation in even the worst crisis. I see people who were invested in 08 and 09 and did not panic out of their strategy, and they've come out ahead. As long as you're patient and you diversify and you're risk adjusted, you will come out ahead. As long as you don't try to go to Vegas with your nest egg, you are, which is what a lot of people did between 03 and 07. Everyone became suddenly aggressive. My risk tolerance is no longer conservative. What are you doing? Like, why do you have in this very conservative allocation if the market is ripping and I want to be with it? And then in 08, those same people who yielded and parted ways with their own true emotional reactions, then they suddenly saw like half of their money gone. And then of course they, as you said, Deborah, like they sold at the lows and they haven't been back in. And I was looking at the market today, 1324 on the S&P, so we're over 100% recovery since then. So I'm not saying put all the money in the S&P, but you know what? There is a way to grow money slowly. My dad always told me, get rich slowly, meaning the right way, Don't take any shortcuts. And that's how you do it. It's not a fun, exciting, exhilarating process. It shouldn't be. That's what people forget.
She's right. She's very right. It shouldn't be.
Well, Marina, you mentioned the word control, and I think it's really important because that's going to help everybody. And there's a lot of things that are outside of our control. Take the European debt crisis. It's really upsetting and unsettling, and it's scary. It's totally out of our control. So look at the things over which you do have control. You have control over your income, and you really have control over your spending. And that's a big hot button for me, because we spend so much. We're such good spenders. I had a client who retired at 65, and she was a secretary. She wasn't an executive assistant. She was a secretary all her life, and she had about $1,400,000 in her retirement account when she retired. And I was astounded. And I asked her how she did that. She said she lived on 90% of her take-home pay from day one. Wow, that's really amazing. So we all have control over our spending. You might not have control over the market. It's a good place to have your money grow, have advice, and understand what you're investing in. That's something you have control over. If you don't understand what's in your portfolio, it shouldn't be there. You should be able to maybe not be the market maker for that commodity, but you should be able to explain to your next door neighbor why that asset is in your portfolio. What is it doing for you? Why is it there?
How many guidance for us, kind of long-term, for those of us who may have lost money due to business failures, real estate, stock market timing, and how to recoup over time, the best kind of strategies for recouping some of that lost capital.
It wouldn't be any different strategy than what I would say to a 25-year-old. Know what you have, know what you're gonna need, and how you're gonna fill in the gap. It's just that you have to be more focused, and we'll probably have to make more concessions. Maybe it's another job, maybe it's developing a business, maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's really cohabiting and changing your living situation and having your housing expense. Maybe you're gonna be more creative, more focused, and doing it now as opposed to later. So
Well, those strategies apply to your income and spending situation. I think there was also part of the question that was asking for, do I need to invest differently? Or
I do think that a lot of people are looking backwards and getting stuck on the past, and actually, you know what, the past is gone. We have, again, I don't mean to be a cliche, but we have the present and the future. So I would just tear out the rear view mirror and throw it out the window if you can, because I haven't seen anyone gain anything from it, right? And then after that, I noticed with a lot of women that I meet on a daily basis regarding investments, and the minority take ownership of their situation, but others kind of delegate the job to the men, or many times they don't stand up and say, hey, explain what that means, like in plain language, because everyone likes to talk about these highfalutin terms that seem to be so intimidating. And you know what, the years of the stock job with the latest stock pick are gone. So I love to engage, the wife or the lady in the room always, and encourage them to, ask the questions, kick the tires. Sorry, I don't have any better lady analogies, because in this office they always talk about, I'm the quarterback of your financial life. Every wholesaler that comes to talk to us gives me another nonsense analogy like that. Tell them, look, next time I'm not coming here to listen to you unless you come up with something better than that.
And that's really important, because I have not found that men are better investors by any means. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows that women are far better investors overall. So ladies, it's very important that you don't leave it to the guy. He's probably not going to be any better and may not be as good as you could be.
I want to share one story too. There was a CPA that referred this client, asked me to look at this client situation, and her husband had died, and very typically and traditionally her husband had handled the finances. So when he died, she inherited his IRA, and this guy came in and she thought he was her husband's advisor, but he had sold the husband a single product some years before. And he put her in the most inappropriate investments I'd ever seen. And we ended up getting her an attorney and filing claims, and she got about 40% of the money back and really lost it all. And there's a statistic that is true that says about 70% of all women over the age of 60 don't have any of the money from insurance proceeds after 3 years. That the husband dies, spouse dies, and they get the money, they're unaccustomed, and that's changing because as women become more involved in their own investing, but the traditional woman who hasn't been involved in investing and making those big major financial decisions gets this big lump sum of money and is very vulnerable and doesn't have the money, whether it's an unethical advisor or family members that all of a sudden pop up and need mom's financial assistance. So knowing what you're doing from the beginning is really helpful.
We had a couple of questions in the audience. Let me just say the order of people that I saw raising their hands. The lady in the light purple sweater, the dark turtleneck over there in the blue, and then you in the second front row. Okay, so first please.
I'm just dying to know, I've had a couple of clients say they've taken their 401ks or their IRAs and they've done self-directed IRAs. What's the process and how do you coach people with how to direct where they want to invest their money?
So basically a 401k is your company sponsored retirement plan, right? And then when you leave the firm, you can either keep it at that company sponsored plan, or you could roll it over to your own IRA rollover account, which has no tax consequences, right? And then that may open up a lot of possibilities in terms of investment vehicles, right? On the other hand, if you want to borrow from your 401k, which we don't encourage to do, but some people don't want to lose that capability, then you want to keep it in a 401k plan. I mean, my recommendation is to roll it over. And then it's mainly the same concept in terms of working with a financial advisor. You have to still have the job of finding someone that you trust, coming up with what kind of risk tolerance you have, whichever method you find is most suitable to you as a person. Each person in the room is completely different. So, and then you come up with an investment strategy that is based on when you want to retire, and that's pretty much the same principles apply to every kind of account. You can afford to have more aggressive investments sometimes in a tax deferred account because you don't have to pay taxes until you take the money out, right? So you defer your tax bill in terms of investments. So sometimes a good strategy, as long as you have a sound asset allocation between your taxable accounts and your tax deferred, you want to put more higher turnover investments in a tax deferred account. So that's a good way to use an IRA. And some people, depending on, of course I'm not a tax advisor, but some people that are in a year when they have a low tax bill, they may want to use, and they're young and they have a long time to make up for the money that they pay for in taxes. There is something called a Roth conversion these days that is very useful for some individuals, not everyone. So you have to make sure that, and that all comes up when you do a financial plan with Pamela, or like you pursue a financial plan or a retirement plan with myself or any other individual out there. And all of these ideas should be proposed by the investment professional. And you could add value to it too, but it's a collaborative effort, so.
Yeah. And could you decide that you wanted to take your self-directed IRA and invest in, say, a private company, or would you have to invest it in a specific fund? Do you have a lot of freedom?
Well, Penelope, good job. I know some people decide to invest, and I'm not endorsing any kind of investment here.
Yeah.
But there is some flexibility these days where people can invest in real estate or.
Right.
Yeah.
But just specifically for me, I have my kids' money in a trust account. And I have to tell you, Marina manages my money extremely
Oh my
well.
gosh.
It's literally goes. And they're young, right? They're 20 and 21. So really it's my money that's in their trust account.
Mhm.
But But in that particular instance, we did have a private opportunity outside of the traditional. And I looked at the prospectus, and obviously I didn't just like go, oh, okay, this sounds like a good idea, write a check kind of deal. But we invested it, and I have lots of opportunities like this, but this one I thought was a particularly good one. And the deal is, I don't really want them to have their money when they're 25, because what the hell are they gonna do with it? And as we talked about this. And so it was an opportunity to take some of their money and invest it in this private company. And is it going in a good direction? I think it's going in a good direction. They're not gonna see a return from this company for 5, 6, 10 years, as far as I'm concerned. As long as that company keeps growing at a certain rate, it will be good investment for them down the road. They can't touch it. They don't even know they have it, but they can't, even if they did know they have it, they couldn't touch it, right? It wouldn't be a good thing. So was that a good strategy? We talked about it. It's like, it's not a phenomenal amount of money. It may in the long run turn out to be, if they go public or get bought by another company, it may end up being a good investment for them.
It is what we call, we have a risk allocation framework that we try to keep people within. So there's the personal risk, right, which is a risk that people need to take to have a roof over their heads, right? And you don't want it to be too extreme, because that's your livelihood, it revolves around that. Then you have your market risk, right, which is to fight off inflation if there is such a thing in the future, which we anticipate with the $1 trillion we're spending and all of the devaluation that we are anticipating, right? So we cannot afford not to kind of risk our money. That's why we're here today in the market. And then there's something that we call aspirational risk, right, which is kind of your wild card situation. Like I let Penelope do. So in case it goes through, a concentrated position, we deal with that all the time in the Valley here. Like we have all of these IPOs and clients who have like all in one stock and then cash, and you try to diversify that to have the right balance between your personal risk, your market risk, and your aspirational risk. So yes, you can have certain, through a brokerage firm or through some private equity investment, in some cases you can pursue private investments or real estate investments in an IRA. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
I actually want to go back to the co-pilots, because I think they are important. And I personally, I work for a startup, so I don't have I don't have time to manage really the money. So I trust in this co-pilot, and I had just a very bad experience for the last 3 years. My husband and I actually went with the same co-pilot. My husband was more the risk taker, so he lost literally half of his retirement funds. I was a little bit more risk averse, and he kept the money where it was, but also it didn't grow. So after 3 years, I finally got out, and I went with a more bigger financial, company, competitor to Merrill Lynch. So because I figured it's probably better to be with a bigger company than just with one guy. But whatever, my first question is, how do you know you are with the right co-pilot? What are like the red flags to watch out for? Because for me it took 3 years, and all what I heard is, like we had calls like, every half a year, and he said it's the market, and that's why it's not growing. And I did this for 3 years, I said eventually, I need to move on, right? The second question is, in terms of the investment strategy and the risk allocation profile. So I've gone through all of this, and that's like a typical thing when you start with an investment company, right? So, and I'm thinking like, well, if I give them the time horizon, I want to retire in 20 years, they probably gonna manage my money very differently as if I would tell them, I'm gonna retire in 5 years. So I think, so what I'm thinking right now is it's probably because the risk profile allocation, I don't think doesn't work that well anymore, because everything that I see is history, and like your competitor was telling giving me charts from the 1970s, and I'm like, this doesn't apply.
That's right, yes.
So is it wise, and I would love to hear, your opinions on this, to go with a shorter term type of strategy? I'm gonna retire in 5 years, that's not my plan, but I'm thinking, should I tell them I wanna retire in 5 years and have them actually manage the money to this, and then in 5 years, we're gonna go another 5 years, and better than telling them I'm gonna retire at 20.
One little comment and then of course I'll- but I think the burden shouldn't be on you to have to tell them that, okay, I'm gonna lie to them because they're gonna put me in this aggressive portfolio because I'm retiring in 20 years, that I have to tell them in 5 because they're gonna, no, they should respect the current market environment that we're dealing with, which is very treacherous. So even if someone is retiring in 20 years, if you look at the performance for bonds in the last 10, they like really outperformed stocks significantly. So everyone is kind of reassessing what aggressive means, you know, because you don't want to, you want to make sure that while things are not really visible, you do not want to catch a falling knife. It's better to, you know what, like win by not losing in the near term, and then when there's a little more visibility, there's always opportunity to become more aggressive. But I think one has to be somewhat tactical and defensive in environments such as these. And it's not a matter of time horizon, it's a matter of the environment that we're living in. And I've noticed many clients that like have different time horizons. They're all in similar ranges given the outlook that we have right now. I don't know, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I
Talk
think,
also about the red
just,
flags, because I think that is what people.
yeah,
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
things that I would just say to you is that you've said a couple of things that are interesting to me. One is that you and your husband have very different risk tolerances, and that deserves to be evaluated a little bit more. The fact that you're not investing together is something just to be looked at, and I'd be curious about that. Because you're probably better off not having two different strategies where one wins and one loses, because that can actually set you up to have some very complicated issues in your marriage. So I'd be careful with that, based upon my experience working with couples. Again, it sounds like you have a lower risk tolerance at an emotional level, and that's why you're trying to outthink the system by giving it a shorter time horizon. It feels to me a little bit like you might be better off looking at having very clear agreements relative to your expectations in the market, and an advisor who really listens to that with a strategy that is not necessarily buy and hold. I think buy and hold is not where we're at in the world today. You need somebody who's willing to sell based upon certain parameters that have a comfort level for you, right? We're not living in the same world any longer, and if at a certain threshold of either upswing or downswing, you're uncomfortable, you should sell. I think the tax consequences should be minimized, always second to your emotional well-being. So your investment people are famous for saying, oh, you can't sell that, you're gonna have tax consequences. Well, I'd rather you have tax consequences than you can't sleep at night, or you lose your money, and then you no longer trust yourself. And then you no longer trust yourself or anybody else. That doesn't work. So it's really about finding someone who's the right fit for you, who will really listen and hear you and invest in accordance with your emotional tolerance, which I consider different than your risk tolerance necessarily.
And I'm curious about what the process looked like when you were interviewing this co-pilot, because you're gonna get on the plane, and it's not a they don't have a united uniform. You don't have a consistent educational process. There are certification processes out there, and there are credentials, and so there are some. But anybody can call themselves a financial advisor. So I mean, there's some licensing if you're going to buy and sell securities for somebody else. But so looking at the credentials of the person in whom you're placing a lot of trust. Looking at the more subjective values. I mean, are they really asking you questions about not just your risk tolerance, but what are your objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you care about? Why is money important to you? What do you want your money to do for you? Let's work with your tax person. Let's make sure all the things, the rest of the things, financial things are in place in your life in addition to your portfolio. We're not just looking at the S&P 500 going up every day. And that can be very hypnotizing, and that's kind of what the media does. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's down. what about the rest of your life? How's your estate planning coming along? What kind of tax strategies are, so looking at, like, doing the due diligence. If you were gonna hire, if you had these adopted children and you were gonna hire somebody to be the co-pilot and you were the fiduciary, what kind of due diligence do you do in evaluating this person? What's the corporate tenor of the firm? What are they about? You know, what's the experience of the individual? What's their community involvement? What do they care about? How often do they call you to find out what's going on in your life without having any monetary objective? How are they paid? How are they paid?
Yeah, I have
you
one
know,
thing to add to that. I think that references are important.
I was gonna say
This
the
day and
exact
age,
same
you
thing.
have to have a proven track record that can be verified, because it's hard. It's not a science, it's an art to invest. And so you want to see that that's the best proof, right? Other people's experience, people that you trust. I mean, that's the best source to. I have a checklist in my office that says like what to look for when you're interviewing a financial advisor. In fact, I get interviewed a lot. Like they said, okay, I think I was interviewed repeatedly, like, okay, I got this checklist, sorry, you know what, I have it under the table, but I have to ask you all these questions. So I think it's a great thing to come up with a list of questions, and I can send it to Linda or Bettina or somebody, and you can share it with them after the event, but yeah.
How many financial advisors do you recommend the average person should interview before they make a decision on what works for them?
Until you find the right one.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Right.
Would you also?
Quick comment and then.
Yeah, a quick comment. So I'm in the real estate business, and it's the same thing in my business, and I'm sure in a lot of your businesses. If you were gonna go and get your hair cut, okay, or you were gonna go have a facelift, or something which was going to really impact your life, all right? Not a haircut. But you are not gonna pick somebody out of the yellow pages. The first thing you're gonna go to is one of your friends, and you're gonna say, who would you use if you're gonna get your hair cut? Or you moved to a new town and you're gonna ask for a referral. That's what we do. We ask for referrals. And there is hands down, that's the best way to find anybody to do anything. So ask 3 friends, get 3 referrals, and talk to friends.
That's true. I noticed, and this, I don't mean to be stereotypical here or overgeneralizing, but I notice a lot of men have no fear in talking about how much money they have, or like talking about money to their fellow men, right? But I see that women are much more discreet, so maybe it's hard to ask for a referral when it comes to, or for a reference or anything. But I think that's where we need to empower ourselves and start opening up about our, like, not like be an open book, of course, but at least have opened the conversation in terms of finances with other women. So
GABA Facebook groups are very good for that.
Right.
Ask the other GABA people.
Yes.
You know, we
Right.
see that all the time. GABA Facebook, GABA Yahoo groups, people ask questions all the time. How do I ship to Germany? Do you have a financial advisor? Who do you recommend? So that's really helpful.
Right, let me just take a list of the
I think
remaining
I was the
questions.
next one, actually.
You were next, I
Yeah.
think, and then the lady over here, and 1, 2, okay, yeah.
So I've got a couple questions. One is that I'm mathematically challenged, so I can't remember. I think so. Money, I just don't like it very much. And so my husband does do all of our financial stuff, and he just kicks in and all the pays the bills online. And I'm from Germany, so the whole check thing is also kind of antiquated to me. So I'm just not very comfortable, with money, especially here in the States, because it's just not kind of how I do it. I had to learn how to write a check when I moved here. So what's the minimum amount of involvement that I should have? And should we, for example, go together to meetings with a financial advisor as a minimum, or should I do more? My 401k, I have no idea what that's invested in.
What do you think?
I don't want to do it at all. I mean, I have a full-time job.
What do you think you should? I hear that you don't want to because it's an area of discomfort for you, but what do you think is?
Oh, I should
What do you
be-
think is a healthy healthy
Well,
for you.
I should probably know what our investments are.
The phone number of your investment advisor.
Okay, so you should have an idea of what your worth is.
But the thing
and
is
where-
that if I
where
know
you're-
that, then I'll forget it 2 weeks later.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, 2,
Boys or girls?
both, one of each.
One of each. I have 2 daughters, and I feel like I listen to, TED? It's, there's, on Virgin America, they have TED, like, I had nothing better to do, so I think Sheryl Sandberg, is she the COO of Facebook? And she was amazing, and you could go online and look it up, but she said, you know what, women never sit at the table, like, they never show up to, like, for me, for my daughters, what I want to teach them is that, you know what, that you need to take ownership of your life, and sometimes it's not fun, you're not interested,
Well,
but your husband can lead it, but at least he needs to propose to you, and you need to agree to the strategy, or at least be aware and follow it. I
have so little knowledge of
but
finance.
over time, you
Well,
get
educate
more.
yourself. I mean, I'm an attorney. I'm from Germany
You
here,
see?
so I'm educated in 2 countries. So I have done so much education on that, and I kind of feel like I'm done educating myself. So I don't want to broach like a whole new topic.
I have a really good book I'm gonna loan you. It's called Everything, Why Women Are Afraid of Money and What You Can Do About It. And the authors who was there was a psychologist and a journalist, and they did a very unstatistical survey, but they went around and looked at phobias that women have and this fear of money, and they called one of the phobias they called money blindness. And they say women that have money blindness often will get a money guide dog in a husband. And they'll do it all. And how do you overcome that? But you're obviously talented and intelligent.
And it's not for my mom, because she was a great investor.
Well, that may be the thing right there. I'm looking for where's the emotional hook. I mean, there's something that is keeping you from wanting to do this that you don't see.
Well, probably because
and it's
other
not
people have
really
always done it. I don't know, but it's hard for me to get into it.
Well, I think you have a certain level of discomfort about it,
Right.
otherwise you wouldn't have raised your hand about it. So I think it's like how do you eat an elephant? It's
Yeah.
like one bite at a time. You don't have to be a financial analyst, but you should, get a statement of your net worth. You should open up your statements as they come in. You should know where they fit in your overall planning. You should know what benefits. Once I met with my sister and brother-in-law, and she just literally fell asleep when I was talking to her. This was really, really devastating to me. Your own very own sister. But she tuned out, and that's the thing. She didn't want to know. But she doesn't know how much insurance they have. She doesn't know what the mortgage interest rate is.
Okay, so that's going to be our first step. I'm going to try to
step by step, small
do it,
steps.
And then, is there anybody that anybody can recommend who's kind of an international advisor? Because my problem always is also that I have assets in Europe, and then what do I do? And for example, I'm also a member of the bar there, so they have a pension plan still. Is it worth paying into that or not? Or I had trouble finding kind of person that can advise both on American
Well,
and
again, I
international
would just take small steps.
assets. Like, is there anybody that
Do you have a family advisor here? Do you go to the meetings? Do you make a list of questions and go to the meetings and participate?
Yeah. But how do you find someone who does American German?
Well, you're in a great.
You may
I
need,
know.
you may need two people. I mean, realistically, you may need 2 people, somebody here and somebody there. I wouldn't let that be the obstacle.
Right, and there's people here, that do international wealth management in the U.S. So, and you may have to have one offshore advisor in the U.S. and one onshore advisor.
And then you can be in charge of the one abroad.
Exactly. I love that, adding more to her. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I found specifically for that problem with assets in Europe and assets here, that dichotomy, and then there's an additional layer of silos that goes across it because there are legal aspects, there are financial management
Exactly.
aspects, and tax
Yeah,
advisory,
tax,
and none of them takes kind of a more holistic view of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And getting all of that together in your
Yeah,
brain
that's
is a
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
task to
And so
do.
that's why I was
No
hoping
matter
if there's
how
one
inclined you are
person.
for that. And I've been trying to address some of that last year in the panel that I organized in the East Bay by having
Yeah.
more advisors focused on German American
Yeah.
aspects of it. Today it's really more around
Because just, I mean,
Yeah,
easy
but
questions
come back
become
and ask
really
later.
complicated.
Yeah.
If you have to talk to, one here and then one there, and then they don't talk to each other, and then.
Okay,
I'm
but you
supposed to
can
have
start
one.
with your 401k at work, that's an
Yeah.
easy number one.
Yeah.
Not, what is the reason? Give me an excuse for that.
Here's
That I don't
one of
know
the
what it
things,
is.
401k, easy.
here's
We
one of
have-
the things that's
Send
very,
me the list, yeah,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, very important for you, and I would say this to any female client. The fact of the matter is, you can't believe how many clients who I had to sit across the table with because they lost their spouse.
I know, yeah.
And I just have to tell you that for the sake of yourself and your children, you have to know, because you never know.
I know,
what
well,
will
my,
happen.
yeah, my dad
It's
passed
so
away early,
critical
my
that
mom
you
knew
know.
everything, so it was, yeah, I know, I should
So
know that.
I am one of these women, and what I wanted to tell you, I understand you feel uncomfortable about the checks and everything, and I had the same thing, but don't forget you are raising children in this country and they need to know how things work here, and you as the mother should know that too. So
Yeah, well,
that's my
they've got the answer.
two cents.
Just grab the bull by the horns, okay?
Yeah.
And then that's
Because
it.
the father might not always be to ask the questions when it comes to finances, and you learn the language, you learn how school works here, you learn everything, and this is part of it. And your
Yeah.
children would like you to know that too, so that mom can answer these questions too. And I know it because I
This
was
just reminds me. I just opened
Are
just a
you
little
finished?
savings account for my 3 children, and it was a living nightmare, I must say, because I don't know how much paperwork is being spent here on little things like opening a simple savings account, because, they got some money from somebody. I was like, oh, great, let's go to the bank and open an account for you. Just, to kind of get that education. And boy, I have this much paperwork, and I don't know how many pins and tens and whatever they send me. I so relate to what you're saying, because things are so over papered here and so over tripled and complicated. It's really, we're very used to simple matters in Germany. Things are very easy for you, and all that financial, all these financial things, like, yeah.
You're all brilliant and you're all capable, get over it, just do it.
Thank you, yeah.
All right, let's see, next lady in the red sweater, and then I have 2 or 3 questions on that side of the room.
I had a very concrete question, is how much does it cost to work with a financial advisor? And is it just a fee, or I understand sometimes you're paid by the investments that you
Well,
put people in, so I'd really like to understand that more and how
Yeah,
much it would
we
cost.
have 2 different arrangements. One is a fee-based arrangement, so if you transact a lot and it makes financial sense to do the fee-based, because you don't have to pay for transaction fees, right? If you have a fee-based arrangement, that you either go by transaction or you go by an annual fee that is charged on a quarterly basis. So depending on how cost effective it is for the client, you would pick the transaction platform or the fee-based platform. So it's such a personal, you have to go through the planning process, see what kind of needs you have, and then determine what kind of fee structure is best for you. And to uncover that, it's a complimentary consultation, so you don't get charged for all the work up front to determine what kind of platform would be better for you.
Is there a
Okay?
ballpark range of the
Well,
fee-based?
I mean, it all depends. I don't like to specify because it depends. But I mean, I can give you, like, for the fee-based platform, it's 1% typically per year. That's on average. So you get charged 0.25% per quarter okay, that, so the average balance of the account that particular quarter, you get applied a 0.25% for that quarter. If you leave the first quarter, then you don't get charged for the rest of the year. If you leave a month into the quarter, it's like prorated to the day you left. So you pay for the days that you were basically advised on.
So hypothetically, if I had, to make it easy, $100,000 portfolio, it would
be
cost me $1,000.
$250 a month. And for example, if the stock market dips, for example, or your investment strategy dips a little bit the first quarter, then it wouldn't be the 250. It could be less depending on the balance that particular month. You see?
But then are you also paid on, then if you go with that, you're not paid on the transactions? But
Right, there's no transaction fees to the
Okay.
client if there's a fee-based arrangement. But some people don't transact, they buy and hold a bond forever. So you cannot apply a fee based structure to that client, because what are you doing? Just buy and hold in treasuries? Like, you're not gonna charge 1% a year to hold treasuries. So that's why I'm saying I don't wanna get into the fee universe, because it's so complex and it's all very personal. It depends on each person's investment strategy. But all of the advice, like the planning and all of that, is included in the fee. So, and, yeah.
We have a little different model, because we're not commission-based at all. But most of the big wirehouses will have that option, so you can be charge a commission when your broker or advisor sells something or buys something, or we're fee-based. So we charge a planning fee that's appropriate to the amount of work that we think that we're gonna spend with you. So for example, if you were coming in and it was really late in your career and you were really trying to make up, and we thought we were gonna meet with you more frequently, or you had a very complicated situation, or we just saw that there was gonna be a lot of other advisors, or we'd have to do a lot more time, we might charge a higher planning fee. So we charge anywhere from $500 to $5,000 a year as a planning fee, and then if we manage your money, we start at 1%, and that goes down. The more money we manage for you, that percentage goes down, but we don't make commissions on selling and buying.
Right, I think that fees, I mean, are important, but they're like paying taxes and losing 50% of your money by not selling at the right time. So you have to find the right co-pilot and then make sure that the fee structure is a sensible one. But it shouldn't be like, unless it's an astronomical fee that they're charging you, but their work is worth something many times, as long as they're getting paid fairly for their work. So that's my opinion on that. Yeah.
Over there.
So I'm just curious, and since you're in real estate, what do you think about, for example, we're 30 or so women here, and every person put $10,000, and we buy a house together.
All 30 of us?
Why not? I mean, wouldn't you think
there
that
are
it's a better investment
there are
than
investment
putting your
strategies.
money? I mean, I'm just curious.
Right, so I would say there's, and Marina will back me up like this,
Will I?
You better.
I will.
First of all, there are investment strategies like that where you buy into a real estate investment trust. Okay, you need to trust whoever is managing that is going to manage it, because you have no individual say. So personally, I would not put my money in a real estate investment trust. Given the way the market has gone, given the decisions people are making on your behalf, I would think you are far better off putting it into an individual house. Now, I would say real estate is a great wealth builder. It is the foundation of most people's wealth, is their real estate. Nonetheless, you need to have a diversified portfolio. And don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your eggs in real estate. Put it in other investment strategies that you can get to. Like I said, if you can afford to put money over here in a private company that you think is going to do well, invest there. Put a piece of your portfolio in, start with your primary residence. Everybody needs a primary residence. You need a roof over your head. Food, shelter, those are the things we need, they're basic needs. Then put the balance into a vehicle that will grow, just like with Merrill Lynch or one of the other financial advisors. That's what I would say. You have to have a balanced portfolio. If you have money to invest and you want to take your $10,000 and invest it, okay, across the country, you can buy real estate for significantly less than you can buy it here. The thing about investing in real estate, once you've got your primary residence, okay, you can buy a single family home for $150,000 somewhere else in the country, right? You can buy it for $100,000. Take your $10,000, okay, or your $20,000, invest it there. People don't invest in real estate where they can't see it, right? You can't see your investment portfolio. You don't control Coca-Cola or wherever else you might be invested in, right? You don't need to control your real estate. So if you can buy a single family home somewhere else in the country, buy it, pay the money, have a property manager manage it, all of that. You hear nightmare stories about tenants. You get a good property manager, just like you have a good investment manager. It's all about the people that you work with. That will appreciate. Not tomorrow, you're not flipping it, right? But over the long haul, it will appreciate. If you have break-even cash flow on a real estate investment, you leave it there, you park it there, and in 10 years' time, you sell it and move the money into something else, or even 5 years and move it into something else. There's an incredible vehicle in this country to move money from one investment property to the other and not pay any taxes, okay? It's called a 1031 exchange. That is the absolute way to build wealth with real estate. It's slow, you have to do it properly, you have to follow the rules. But if you follow the rules, I can give you an example. I have a client who paid $75,000 to buy 100 acres outside Las Vegas in foreclosure 20 years ago, okay? That's flipping, not flipping, that's not the right word, but by selling and investing and selling and investing and selling and investing. Okay, that $75,000 investment is now worth $4 million profitability. Okay, she's never paid taxes on it. Okay, generates $150,000 a year in income. Okay, and it started with 100 acres of nothing outside of Las Vegas, right? Okay, that's a success story. It doesn't happen every day, but she's 80 years old now, right? So, but that is an example of how you can use real estate to build wealth. But it's only a portion of what you should do. You should be diversified, diversify, diversify. Don't put all your money in stocks. Don't put them all in bonds. Make sure you have a vehicle to balance your wealth. But real estate is a great investment, especially now. Especially now, the money is free.
And make sure you have an exit strategy.
You have to have an exit strategy.
You're gonna buy this, but what are you gonna do with it?
Right.
How long are you gonna keep it? How are you gonna get out if you need some money for something else? I mean, it's not necessarily liquid. So
Right. No, it's not liquid. It's not liquid. But the money right now is free. There's 4%. You can't.
Right, the rates are
It's all about leveraging.
at the lowest, right?
I was just checking time, and we're coming up on the time when we should start to wrap up, have a little bit more food, drink, and network, and then get the garage deadline. So the question over here, I think you have a purple sweater, and after that, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to maybe come up with one or two key takeaways that your specific perspective on the topics that were touched on, people could take home with them.
So my question is, having assets in two countries, I think that was alluded to in the email. Instinctively for me, whether you live in one place or, in 3 countries, I think that's a wise decision. However, I'd like you guys to talk more about it. What were your thoughts when you guys were saying having 2 accounts? I'm assuming this is not just investing internationally, I'm saying like actually 2 bank accounts in 2 different countries, so.
Well, I don't think it's a different strategy. I just think it's a multi-level strategy. That you're looking at what you have in place, where you want to be, what you want those assets to do for you, and then getting good tax advice, because that's really the issue. What are those assets going to produce for you, and how is it going to be taxed in the United States, or what is the long-term plan? Where are you going to live? Because that's going to dictate a lot of the decisions about taxes and what each of those assets are going to do for you.
I think that that's such a general question. It's really hard to decide as to how to what statement to make in that regard, because, I mean, my father and brother and sister, right, they worked at Merrill Lynch in Argentina for 30 years, right? So for an Argentine national, that means one set of things. For a U.S. national with offshore, you know, like you have to declare certain things in the U.S., right? You don't want to be penalized, so you want to make sure. It depends on each individual, like what country are you from, where do you plan to have the money. I mean, Merrill has the Swiss bank, you know, then you have that as its own set of rules for, and certain people can access it, others can't. So you have to have an individual consultation. I mean, we do have presence in Asia, everywhere in the world in terms of Merrill and Bank of America. So we can point people in the right direction in terms of telling you, okay, talk to this, you have this case, so we tap into resources and say, okay, we have a person in this country, that country, the other one, and we communicate with them. I have clients who have their parents in Brazil and their cousins in Chile, like all kinds of dynamics like that. But I team up with people in offices in other countries to provide a unified type of advice, right? So yeah, it's all so personal that you have to try to bring it down to your.
And I wanted to say, one of those levels, really, you really wanna look at estate planning. Because it's not only managing those assets, but when you look at getting assets transferred when you're living in another country, it's really much more challenging. So you wanna make sure your estate plan addresses that. And that's where you're gonna need two legal advisors or an advisor who specializes in working with New Zealand or Great Britain.
Where are you from?
I've lived in the Philippines and lived in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's a great place to park some money. Probably not the
Can we
Philippines.
break on the board? You know, we probably just have a couple more minutes, and then we're interested in doing a raffle, so.
So, I mean, my takeaway points is like, don't be intimidated by any of this, and you know what, like it's almost like cooking, right? You just start with like trying to put, like identify your goals, identify your resources, and then start working on the recipe and try to get Julia Child to help you or someone else. But I mean, it's a basically ongoing process, and it's almost like you learn it by osmosis, by being in it, and right, you have to fake it till you make it and just challenge yourself. So that's how it, I mean, how I've seen it work for many other women, so, yeah.
And one of the things we were both just commenting when we sat down, how amazing it is that there are so many women in business here in this room, and that's really quite a phenomena, and really only in this country would you see that. I mean, this is not what I see when I travel to other countries and teach or talk. So one of the best solutions to all of your money fears is making more money. And so really emphasis on what drives you, you know, what are your gifts, how are you leveraging them, using your creativity, your gifts, your knowledge, your talent, and in a way that's useful, and finding out what that is, and then getting help and advice and support on, you know, maximizing your business opportunities. Because you know what, your business opportunities are always going to be far greater income opportunity in most cases than your income opportunities. I mean, from the standpoint of investing, depending upon your net worth, of course. So really focus on yourself and your businesses and how can you maximize that? Because that is the solution to everything, ultimately. As well as good management and co-pilots.
Well, I would focus on knowledge, knowing what you have in place, knowing what your benefits are, knowing what your spouse is doing, and, you know, and having that confidence and building that base, and then knowing what you need, and what is it going to cost to run that railroad. And we didn't talk about it tonight, but maybe in a future program, I think what's also important is knowing what you wanna leave on the planet. We're gonna talk about philanthropy or leaving things, but leaving a legacy, and how much wealth is enough, how much do you really need? What do you want your money to do for you? What do you want it to do for the planet or some other cause? And how could you do that in a way that serves yourself and your family's needs, but also do something, and it's really quite motivating. I've had the privilege of working with some clients that are very philanthropic, and not necessarily highly affluent, but very philanthropic. And because they have the confidence, they know what they need and they know their needs are met, they can be very generous. So make more money, know what you have, and then do 3 things. Before you get to bed tonight, write down 3 things that you're gonna do as a result of just coming here. 3 action items, whether it's reading a book, or opening the statement, or doing some more due diligence and interviewing more people, or going to the lawyer's office, or at least making just 3 things that their takeaway, their action items. Because it's not what you know, what you do. Learn that. That's my trainer says. Not how many you think about, it's what you actually do. So we have a lot of resources on our website, Road to SlideShare. We have some how to choose this person and links to Social Security, and so there's lots of information. We have a lending library too. So
We'll send you an email with all that information. If you send me your links, then I'm happy to post that in there.
GABA is putting together
Oh, you're putting
this
it.
event, so you'll have all the contact information as well as additional reading
We'll send that in
recommendations,
the
as well as
email.
anything that came up today. We'll add that to that, and it will be, I believe, sent out via email as well as posted on the usual website.
And I just want to thank the organizers who put this together. This has been a pleasure.